just about everything: money, good looks, admirers aplenty, and a good chance to prove that he deserves it all.
On March 29, 1974, a film version of The Great Gatsby was released. Based on one of the great American works of literature, the story depicts New York wealth and what money can't buy. Amid reckless people, there is one man with a public image full of money who chases the object of his dreams. Finally, as he faced the crossroads of whether it was even possible to get what he wanted, he dies. Just one day before the film was released, hundreds gathered at a church in New York City to mourn a man whose life paralleled Gatsby, Peter Revson, a race car driver who came from wealth and carried that image of glamour as he chased his goal of the Formula One World Championship. While Gatsby starred Robert Redford, Revson had an edge on him in real life. Just a month earlier, Revson knocked Redford off the International Best Dressed list, released in February 1974. In the American sports landscape, it's rare for a race car driver to transcend the sports, become a national celebrity. Peter Revson was one of those few. For a time in the early 70s, he was the model of what everyone expected a race car driver to be, an American who won in everything he drove and became one of Formula One's top drivers.
You know who Revson is, don't you? Well, that's Revlon.
This is something a lot of people don't understand. They think that I'm idly rich, and I'm not.
Revlon Cosmetics was formed in 1932 by Charles Revson. The company was notable as the first to use pigments to color their nail polish instead of dyes. As Revlon grew, Charles' younger brother Martin Revson became executive vice president, selling the product to stores. In February 1939, Martin had his first child. So devoted to the company, he named his son after it. Peter Jeffrey Revlon Revson was born in New York City. As the son of an executive, Peter's childhood was the traditional wealthy upbringing of boarding schools in New England. What changed Revlon from a big company to one of the world's largest cosmetics companies was a game show. The involvement also made the Revson brothers central figures in one of the biggest scandals of the 1950s.
Revlon, the greatest name in cosmetics, presents the 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. Yes, the $64,000 question.
If it's the finest of its kind in cosmetics, it's by Revlon.
Beginning in 1955, Revlon sponsored the $64,000 question, a game show that aired on CBS. It was a revolutionary program where contestants would answer general knowledge questions, and their prize money doubled after each right answer until they reached the $64,000 grand prize. Americans were obsessed with it. It quickly became the #1 show on television. The nation's crime rate on Tuesday nights was noticeably lower while the program was on.
I distinctly remember the evening of the very first show on air, Charles Revson, who owned Revlon, who stood in the booth behind me, I heard him say to Walter Craig of Norman Craig and Cumberly Advertising Agency, "Well, Norman, that's another stiff you've bought on my account. This thing is terrible. And they walked out of there mumbling and grumbling. And, of course, Charlie was wrong. And he was the greatest beneficiary. The sponsors probably quadrupled their sales in 1 year. You're talking about $100 million.
To further increase the impact for Revlon, Charles Revson delegated Martin to oversee production of the show. Because the same contestants returned week after week, show producers claimed Martin instructed that the program be rigged so that popular contestants would remain longer and hold viewers.
Within months, Revlon cosmetic sales soared 200%, while the sponsor kept a chart comparing contestants' ratings with product sales.
Please bear with us. They're on the way. Thank you very much.
Revson would always deny any involvement in rigging the program. At the weekly meetings, according to producers, Revson implied that popular contestants who drew large ratings should be kept on the show. A number of steps would be taken to hold on to popular contestants and to get rid of others.
And we'd sit in the sponsors' meetings and they would say, well, that one's got to go on to 64. Or I don't like that one, let's get rid of him.
And then, quite clearly what they would do is take that man aside and ask him 200 questions in his own field. And they would examine his answers, and they would then know what he knew.
You knew you could ask them questions anywhere in that area. You didn't have to sit down with them and say, all right, now if I ask you this, your answer is that. You knew that their answer would be this.
The $64,000 question wasn't the only game show to control winners. Other shows went so far as to give contestants the answers and to tell them how to act. When the truth about rigged shows was revealed, the Revson brothers were swept up in the controversy that dominated attention.
All I own is this house that I built with my own 2 hands. You didn't build this house. You won it on a crooked 50s game show. I ratted on everybody and got off scot-free. Ha ha!
Investigations on game shows went all the way to the U.S. Congress. While producers said Martin Revson ordered the rigging, he testified that Revlon was entirely unaware the show was rigged. Since there were no laws overseeing television game shows, the fake nature of the program was not illegal. Some contestants had their lives ruined, but the controversy did nothing to hurt Revlon's sales. But even before the game show scandal developed, Martin and Charles Revson had a falling out, and Martin resigned as vice president of Revlon in June of 1958. The two brothers refused to speak for the next 13 years, with Martin suing Charles for $600,000 in 1960. While Peter Revson's racing career was defined by the claim that he was the heir to Revlon, in reality it was his side of the family that was disconnected from the company. I used to deny I was an heir, Peter said in 1973, because after all I hadn't inherited anything. I will, of course, but I didn't want to be known as a spoiled rich kid out for kicks. While Martin Revson testified to Congress and sued his brother, his 20-year-old son Peter was living in Hawaii with his mother. After a brief time as an engineering student at Cornell and Columbia Universities, Revson enrolled at the University of Hawaii, and racing a Morgan sports car in amateur races. A trip to watch the 12 Hours of Sebring in 1957 inspired a love of racing. After a few events in Hawaii, Revson was kicked out of the series for being too aggressive. In 1961, Peter returned to New York, and after a short job at an ad agency, committed himself to racing in SCCA.
And the easiest way for me to get into racing was with a car I was driving on the street, which at that time was a Morgan +4, and I used to go to the racetrack and tape up the headlights and remove the muffler and paste a number on it and go racing, and that's how I got my first experience.
It was complete with a wooden frame, wasn't it?
That's right. If you had an accident, of which I had a few, you need a carpenter to fix it, not a body shop.
While he was one of the top drivers, Revson faced a competitor that he would be tied to for the rest of his career, Mark Donohue. Donohue won the championship, while Revson finished fourth. In 1962, Revson moved to open-wheel cars, starting a Formula Junior team with classmates from Cornell, a pair of brothers named Timmy and Teddy Mayer. By 1963, Peter was determined to make racing his career. Obvious that his family wouldn't give him any money to fund his racing, Revson raised cash by selling his race car, taking what he had in savings and money for college, which totaled to $12,000. 24 years old, he moved to Europe to race Formula Junior cars, hired one mechanic to work with him, and bought an old delivery truck from Jack Brabham that he worked and slept in while racing. Late in the year, Revson began renting garage space at Parnell Racing Team in England. That led him to running 6 Formula One races for the team in 1964. In 2 races, Revson was listed as the owner to get more prize money. His best finish was an 11th at Belgium. The following year, Revson was hired to drive the Lotus Formula 2 car, and Jim Clark and Mike Spence were racing in Formula 1. In May, he won the biggest race of his short career when he won the Formula 3 race at Monaco. In 1966, Peter served as an extra in the movie Grand Prix, before returning to the United States and racing in the Can-Am series. In many ways, 1967 was the most tumultuous year of Peter Revson's life. He was reunited with Mark Donohue to co-drive a factory Ford GT for Holman Moody in the 24 Hours of Daytona. The car fell out of the race with a broken gearbox before halfway. It was behind the wheel of a Ford GT that Revson survived a terrifying crash in the spring. In a private testing session at Daytona, Peter came off the bank turn 4 at 185 miles per hour and cut a right rear tire. The tire came off the rim, which dropped the rear of the car down. Air got under the nose and sent it into a blowover backflip. Revson flew higher than the catch fence before landing and sliding past the pit entrance. He walked away from the crash unhurt, saved by a new roll cage Ford installed in all GTs after Walt Hansgen and Ken Miles died in 1966. Because it was a private test, Ford was able to hide the crash from newspapers, eager to bury the news of the GT's 3rd major crash in 1 year. NASCAR Hall of Famer Bud Moore was in charge of the Mercury Cougar program in the Trans Am series. At Lime Rock on Memorial Day, Moore hired Revson to race, while regular driver Dan Gurney raced in the Indy 500. In his Trans Am debut, Revson won the race, beating Donohue by 2 laps. The worst personal tragedy hit Revson in late July. Peter was an example to his younger brother Doug, who followed him into racing. Running in a Formula 3 race in Denmark, Doug Revson lost his life. In heavy rain, he was hit in the rear while passing another car. Both drivers slid off course and struck a group of officials and spectators. Revson hit a concrete starter stand and was killed instantly. A spectator was killed by the other car. 7 days after his brother's death, Peter made his second start in the Trans Am series at Breyer Motorsports Park in Loudon, New Hampshire. Once again, he lapped the field and scored an emotional win.
Trans Am racing is North America's newest thrill sport, combining tough twisting Grand Prix style circuits with specially prepared production cars, Mustangs, Camaros, Firebirds, Cougars, and believe it or not, an all-American challenge. First time out, the red, white, and blue Javelins from American Motors. The American Motors racing team, George Fulmer, master driver and U.S. road racing champ. Peter Revson, international Grand Prix racer and winner of the Sports Car Club of America's Kimberly Cup, given to the most promising driver on the circuit. How good does it taste to Javelin pilot Pete Revson?
Oh yeah, they're really very surprised that an American Motors car could be as exciting as it is and be as fast as it is and actually compete with a Mustang, say, on the same basis.
Revson's best finish for AMC was a pair of seconds. He also raced in the Can-Am series for Carroll Shelby. In late November, he won a race in Fuji, Japan. For 1969, Shelby hired Revson to lead his Mustang team in Trans Am. A pair of third-place finishes were his best in a year dominated by Donohue and Penske, but the year would be best remembered for what he did in IndyCar. Revson once said, "An American driver of any stature doesn't have much choice about Indianapolis. He has to be there." In 1969, he made his debut in a car owned by Jack Brabham.
Sunday, May 25th, the final day of qualifying with 8 places in the field still open for the great race. The final spot, however, was still in doubt. Rick Muther had qualified 33rd, but any car that could go faster than he had in the remaining time would bump him from the field. And late in the day, one went out to try to do it. It was number 92, a Repco Brabham driven by Peter Revson, Muther sweating it out. Revson, one of the heirs to the Revlon Cosmetics fortune, giving it his all to try to qualify at Indy. When a checkered flag went out, there was no question, Muther knew it. He had been bumped. Revson into the pits, the dream of a young driver's lifetime. He had qualified to race in the Indianapolis 500. A happy young man.
Gentlemen, start your engine.
Peter Revson kept running all day and had a cylinder go out, and I think it was a 4-cylinder engine, as I recall, and he ended up on 3 and finished 5th, and Mark Donohue finished 7th and had made a lengthy pit stop, and I stress there was a lot of mechanical failures, and you cars cruising around several down. I mean, all kinds of cars finished in the top 10 that would have been black flagged under recent rulings. A lot of people have asked, and they're quite upset that Donohue would be given the Rookie of the Year awards from '69 when Revson had finished 5th. But in all fairness, Revson just cruised into. He started last and inherited 5th.
Revson returned to the Brabham team in July for a pair of races on the Indianapolis Raceway Park road course. Peter was a late substitute for Jack Brabham, who had broken his ankle in a testing crash. The afternoon was a pair of 40-lap races. The driver with the best average finish was the overall winner. The first heat, Revson finished 3rd. In the second, he overcame the loss of 3rd gear on his first IndyCar race. Combined finishes also made Peter the overall winner for the afternoon. With an Australian Repco engine, it was the first time a foreign motor ever won an IndyCar race.
Up the hill. Feels good to get some fresh air. Just barely hit 7,500. On the brakes.
Mark Donohue and Roger Penske, team captain, are out to do it again with 2 brand new Sunoco Javelins. Talented young Peter Revson will back up Donohue.
Revson's time at Team Penske was interrupted weeks after the 24 Hours of Daytona, when AMC Javelin was temporarily banned from competition. They hadn't yet built enough passenger cars to meet SECA's production quotas. This left Revson on the sidelines, entering the 12 Hours of Sebring. Fortunately, there was someone looking for a co-driver. It was one of the biggest stars in the world.
Starring Steve McQueen.
Steve McQueen had raced at Sebring in 1962 and picked Revson as co-driver for his return, but McQueen would have to race with a broken left foot.
I busted it in a motorcycle race up at Lake Elsinore, the 100-miler. Busted it in 6 places, and I'd already said I'd drive, so we put some sandpaper on the bottom, taped it on so I keep it on the clutch pedal and adjusted it.
Chances for a good finish relied on Revson carrying an underpowered car and an actor with 1 foot for 12 hours. Against all odds, the pair nearly pulled off the biggest upset in race history.
The year 1970 climaxes 2 decades that have established the 12 Hours of Sebring as the premier auto racing event in North America. One of the greatest is Ferrari, which this year has sent 3 Chargers. The cars are lighter and develop close to 400 horsepower, and the drivers more than equal to the 12 hours. Last year's winner, Jackie Ickx, and America's premier ace, Mario Andretti, head the list.
crutches is the celebrated movie star.
A welcome addition in the sports prototype group is movie actor Steve McQueen's entry, a 908 Porsche. McQueen, although hobbled by a broken foot, will drive the car with Peter Revson, the well-known road racing star. Their class includes the Matras and Alfa Romeos, an uphill fight to say the least. Mario Andretti in Ferrari number 19 leads the field as the race gets underway. A surprise to most of the 57,000 who looked on was the fifth-place position of the McQueen-Revson Porsche 908. The two have done a masterful job keeping the underpowered car in contention. The Andretti Merzario 19, entrenched in first, leads the trouble-free Ferrari parade. As day gives way tonight, Mario Andretti and Arturo Merzario have amassed a 9-lap lead. What was a 3 Ferrari runaway dropped from 2 to 1. Iacchetti number 20 retired with a broken valve spring, and the number 21 car blew a tire and is undergoing repair to damaged suspension. Finally repaired, the number 21 Ferrari joins the fray. Running fourth, the number 48 McQueen-Revson Porsche. But it's not over. Mario Andretti has brought the lead car into the pits and is examining the underside of the Ferrari. Ferrari had as much as 12 laps on the second-place car, but the fast-closing Porsche of Siffert and Rodriguez is cutting into that lead. Merzario goes out, still in first.
Getting close to the end, Mario. What's the trouble underneath the back of the car?
Well, it's the gearbox.
How bad is it?
I don't know. I don't think it's going to finish.
Concerned he might be, Merzario is running very slow. Revson pits the third-place car. The young Charger from New York has done the lion's share of the driving and has not taken relief since nightfall. Revson's lap times are 8 seconds better than McQueen's, and that says something for McQueen, what with his broken foot. The car is held together. In fact, the mechanics have not had to change tires or brake pads. With this combination, Sebring could have a storybook finish. Revson goes out again for another turn. Approaching the 11th hour, the Porsche closes the gap on the faltering Ferrari. At 9:46, it is dead on the course. There's still an hour of racing left, and Ferrari has come too far to call it quits. It's been decided that Andretti will drive the only Ferrari still in contention. Ferrari's deficit is better than 1 lap, and it's doubtful that even Andretti can do it. It wasn't long before Andretti unlapped himself. He is now 5 miles behind the leader and in pursuit of the second-place Revson McQueen car. 20 minutes from the end, Siffert roared into the pits with more trouble for Porsche. A wheel hub failure, the same problem that occurred on the sister car, has stricken Porsche's hopes of victory. At the same time, Andretti overtook Revson, and once again, Ferrari led. The drama never ceased. With minutes to go, Andretti paid a surprise visit to the pits. The McQueen pits were overjoyed, thinking the Ferrari was in trouble. At this point, Andretti's lead was a scant 53 seconds over Revson. But the stop was just for a splash of gas. The minutes were running out, and out of the darkness, one car would emerge the victor. The 12 hours of Sebring was over, and Ferrari had won. McQueen-Revson was second.
McQueen got all the attention, overlooked the fact that Revson may have been in the car for over 9 hours. Peter told reporters the only reason they didn't win was because of Andretti's talent. Mario is such an extremely quick driver that it made all the difference in the world. I'm convinced if Mario hadn't taken over, we would have won. Revson returned to Indy that year in a car owned by George Walther. He went just hoping to qualify, but got an unexpected break that would take his career to the next level.
70, he's back. Not going well with the Walthers. McLarens are having problems. Chris Amon for some reason, could not adapt to the speedway, and he did not like running out against the wall. And as good as a Grand Prix driver as he was, and given a lot of marks for bravery, he just could not adapt to IMS. Then Dennis Holm had a problem in practice one day where the fuel cap popped open and fuel was sucked into the cockpit, and he received some burns. He actually bailed out and did a John Wayne rolling along the track. So then McLaren now was in a position where they needed drivers, and I remember this very clearly, where there was this practice session attended by a lot of people. Carl Williams and Peter Revson tested the two cars. They both went out one at a time and ran like 6 or 7 laps to run quite a bit faster. I think Peter Revson did like 6 laps and got a 166, and Chris Amon had been stuck at 162. Peter Revson ran well but didn't finish.
Just 3 days after the 1970 Indy 500, team founder Bruce McLaren died in a testing crash in England. Taking control of the team after its namesake was Teddy Mayer, Revson's old friend from Formula Junior. Peter called his practice tryout with McLaren at Indy the most important 10 laps of his life. They led to a contract to run full-time in Can-Am in 1971 and run IndyCar's Triple Crown of 500-mile races.
Now there's the third group of drivers, which again is somewhat of a fairly recent development in America. It's the gentleman scion of the rich family driver. His old man made a pot of dough in something, see, which the son has nothing to do with. And so we have that type now beginning to evolve. Dan Gurney is a classic example of that. Peter Revson is probably the most famous example of that type of driver. You know who Revson is, don't you? Or don't many of you know who Revson is? Well, that's Revlon. He's done very well. That is, his father did very well, and he's been able to indulge his sport of international driving, which is a very expensive sport.
If I win the California 500, I'll win the kind of money people think I already have.
The California 500, September 5th, Ontario.
This is something a lot of people don't understand. They think that I'm idly rich, and I'm not. And if I wasn't making a living out of racing, I'd have to be making a living out of something else. So, and this is a much more enjoyable way.
Revson finished out 1970 driving for Carl Haas in Can-Am and the Penske Javelin in Trans Am. At the Trans Am finale at Riverside, Peter got into a dust-up with Sam Posey after the race.
Riverside Trans Am of 1970 was a desperate last effort for us to secure the Chrysler backing for the following year, and we're clearly not coming back unless a miracle occurred in that last race. But I was being held up by Peter Revson in the Javelin, and I had to get by. I could see Parnelli and Mark pulling ahead, and it was desperation city. We had a problem with the car. When I tried to brake late, the rear wheels would lock up, and the thing would kind of get out of control. We'd had that problem leading the race at Elkhart, and we were having it again at Riverside. But I tried Peter on the inside of turn 2. Anyhow, I just had to do something after a few laps. And they did lock up, and I did hit him as he was going into this very fast turn, and both of us spun into the desert at 150 miles an hour. We were really moving fast. It was very scary. Either car could have turned over. And he came back to the pits, and I was looking out toward the track, and he came up behind me, and he got me around the neck, and he threw me down into the pit lane and started to hit me. And Carroll Smith, my crew chief, and a good friend of Peter's, he knew both of us very well, got in between us and restrained Peter. And I'll never forget the look in Revson's face. He was white hot mad. I mean, he was slightly foaming at the mouth, and his eyes were like burning cinders in his face. It was just an extraordinary experience. And that, oddly enough, was the beginning of a long friendship.
While Revson and Posey became good friends, Peter maintained that he didn't tackle Sam intentionally, saying I had him by the front of his lapels, and he was backing up, and he fell right over the pit wall with me on top of him. I never swung on him, so help me.
Car 86, Peter Revson.
Revson didn't have much of a race in 70, but in 71 he caused one of the major upsets of all time. Now he was back with McLaren and Dennis Hulme, and they had the M16s, which were considerably different from the 1970 cars, and they had this little trick wing. You weren't supposed to have a wing on cars, but they had this thing molded into the body. Throughout the month, every day, Mark Donohue driving a Penske McLaren. There were 4 cars built. McLaren had 3 of them, only ran 2 and had a backup. The 4th car was sold to Penske. Every day, Donohue was going faster and faster and faster, and at one point he did almost 181, which was like 10 miles an hour over the track record. 10 miles an hour over the track record. And so he was a shoo-in to win the pole.
Yes, you guessed it. 50 and 3900 seconds, and the speed 178.607 miles an hour. Mark Donohue.
So he goes out and he turned the 4 laps, and it broke the track record, but it wasn't as fast as everybody thought it was going to be. They thought he was going to do 180, and it was like 176 something, with maybe a lap or 2 at 177.
Donohue was very upset because he had asked for a certain setting that the crew wouldn't give him. And you would think that the driver would have a lot of input there, but they knew better. When all the interviews and everything are over, the story is that he went all the way down to the north end, runs into Revson. Revson says, what the heck happened? Because they're very good friends. Donohue proceeds to tell him about this big argument that he had with the crew, and that they wouldn't give him the setting that he wanted. Revson asks him what setting he wanted. Donohue tells him all the information that he was going to do, and as soon as he's gone, Revson memorized the whole thing. He tells the crew, they dial it in, he goes out and knocks Donohue off the pole.
You won't believe it. 50 and 1800 seconds, speed 179.354. He's gone to the pole.
And that was one of the biggest upsets ever. I mean, the crowd, a huge first day qualifying crowd, the whole place just went berserk, and it went on and on and on and on.
Some drivers accept the possibility of death as part of their business. Pete Revson is one of 33 drivers who will try to make his skill behind the wheel pay off over the weekend. ABC's Jim Kincaid reports.
Car 86, Peter Revson.
He's young, 32 years old, wealthy, a member of the Revlon Cosmetics family, a bachelor, but there's something driving him, too. And just now, it's the biggest track prize of them all, the Indianapolis 500, with $250,000 for the winner. But it isn't the money, so why does he do it?
I've always been interested in athletic competition, and I've been interested in cars, and I probably am a frustrated football player and turned out to be a little bit too small, maybe a little fractionally too slow to be a big-time football player. And I tried racing, and it was something I was good at. And I just got to be challenged to the point where I wanted to continue and see how far I could get. And now I'm close to achieving one of my goals, which is winning the 500.
This was the scene last week as Revson qualified with the fastest time on record, over 178 miles per hour, to win the pole position. His pit crew, usually coldly technical, were impressed. With last-minute practice nearly over, Pete Revson has time to think about his last 2 tries at Indianapolis that ended short of his goal. To think about the victory that's more clearly in sight this time.
But I think Indianapolis, if I could win it this year, I might think seriously of walking away from it.
He's a man with just about everything. money, good looks, admirers aplenty, and a good chance to prove that he deserves it all. Jim Kincaid, ABC News, Indianapolis.
May 29th, 1971, at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the world's most famous automobile race, the Indianapolis 500. On the pole, Peter Revson, the well-to-do 32-year-old bachelor from New York, member of the Revlon Cosmetics family, fastest qualifier in Indianapolis history. Next to him, Mark Donahue, graduate engineer from Brown University, sports car trained and, like Revson, driving an English-built McLaren car. The 1971 Indianapolis 500 actually shapes up as a race of battle of two worlds of motor racing. The Indianapolis establishment is represented by people like Bobby and Al Unser and A.J. Foyt, and the world of road racing is represented by Peter Revson and Mark Donahue and Dennis Hulme and the English McLaren cars.
Well, I think we're going to see the faster cars getting a break. I think we're going to see Donahue maybe making the break before Revson even. I think Unser, I think Bobby's going to be up there.
And here they are, poised for the start of the Indianapolis 500 1971. That orange car on the inside on the pole is Peter Revson. The blue car next to him is Mark Donahue, and Bobby Unser on the outside. The green flag is out. They're underway. Going into turn one. Oh, look, my God, the pace car has crashed into a photographer's stand. Mark Donahue has taken the lead. We're on the race. We can't see what has happened down there. The pace car, out of control, crashed into a photographer's stand. People fell out as if a corn crib had been opened, just tumbling down on the track. Unbelievable. He does have a lead. I think he had 3 or 4 seconds on the first lap. In second place is Peter Revson. Revson, remember, sat on the pole. Bobby Unser, who was on the outside of the first row, is now third. That's the way they stand. Now you see Al Unser really moving up on Peter Revson. And Joe Leonard's staying right with him. Now, Al Unser and Joe Leonard are teammates.
Here we are. He's going to use his draft here trying to get past. He should make it after this. He's done it. He's done it. He's passed him.
And Leonard, pretty close behind him, has not quite gotten by Revson yet, but he's trying to do it.
Revson's pulling down. It seems Revson's slowing a little bit. Definitely slowed down. Revson's obviously in some sort of trouble, Jim. It could either be an engine problem or even a handling problem. In Indianapolis, if a driver doesn't feel that he's completely happy with his car, he has to slow down. There's an alarm system goes off inside, and he really has to be cautious. This is an important time to recognize your own limitations at Indianapolis, and here you're seeing probably a driver under those circumstances. We'll have to see how the race continues to see if it's a major problem or whether he'll continue freely.
Mark Donahue appears to be going to have a fairly pleasant afternoon at this point because he just keeps stretching and stretching that lead.
What's he doing? He's on the inside. He's nearly lost it. He's collected it, beautifully corrected. He must be, I think it's a mechanical trouble, Jim, because he's still running all right. It must be a mechanical trouble.
This is the sort of thing that happens at Indianapolis. Mark Donahue way out in front, beginning to lap the other leaders, and has come down into the grass, and it looks like it's the end of the afternoon. Peter Revson has now moved back into third position. In fourth place, Lloyd Ruby in number 12, and then A.J. Foyt in car number 9. What an interesting group of racers. And Bobby Unser now has come into the pits. This is the second place car. Peter Revson is also in. This is a real race to get out of the pits. Whoever gets out first is going to be in second place in the race.
Bobby
and there goes Revson.
Look at Revson, really streaking out, really taking a big advantage here.
Peter Revson streaking out of the pits from behind Bobby Unser, but past him and into second place.
He's adapted very, very well to Indianapolis, a very smooth driver.
Peter, by the way, won a race that you did one time. He won the Formula 3 race at Monte Carlo in 1965, and you, as I recall, won it the year before, right?
That's correct, in 64. The man who wins Monte Carlo is always looked upon with some concern.
Okay, and the man who won the Formula 3 race last year at Monte Carlo, Ronnie Peterson.
Oh, a crash! Coming straight.
Mike Mosley,
very
number
heavy.
4. Oh, terrible crash. He's crashed into other cars that were parked there. That's Donahue's number 66, which was just parked there earlier.
Here's another driver stopping.
Bobby Unser getting out of his car.
No, I don't think so. Bobby's still in his car. He's over on the right. Look at this driver here jumping over. Tremendous impact.
Yeah, there's Mosley going in, and the car of Donahue simply exploding. Gas tanks exploding. And now Bobby sliding into the wall. Here we come, though, to the checkered flag for Al Unser. There it is. The race is over as he crosses that line, the last yard of brick left at the race course that used to be called the Brickyard. Here is the second place car of Peter Revson. He's going to take second.
A handling problem that developed early in the race kept Revson from going for the win, but winning would be something Peter would do a lot during the summer of 1971.
The Canadian-American Challenge Cup Series is being called the ultimate in racing competition, featuring the fastest racing cars in the world with the largest racing engines in use anywhere.
The 10-race Can-Am schedule started in early June. The McLaren team had won the last 4 championships, but faced a new challenge from Jackie Stewart. While Revson was a number 2 driver on the team behind Denny Hulme, the presence of Stewart meant the McLarens couldn't rely on runaway victories. With both drivers pushed to the limit, Revson was often faster than Hulme.
Here is Revson for the last time, and a Can-Am win for number 7, Peter Revson is McLaren, and there's the jump from Hopkins.
Revson already had 5 wins on the tour. Hume, with the Riverside victory, finished with 3. The only other driver to gain a first place this year was Scotland's Jackie Stewart. Hume said afterwards his car ran perfectly. Revson admitted to having some problems. He was just happy to finish where he did to clinch the Can-Am title, and with it a check for $25,000. Bill Lindsay, NBC News.
Revson won 5 out of 10 races and took the championship. The strength of the title convinced McLaren to bring Peter back to Formula One full-time in 1972. He became the first American to run for the World Championship since Dan Gurney in 1968.
New pot of gloss, lip gloss, from Yardley only. It's positively witty.
Ironically, the McLaren F1 team landed sponsorship from Yardley, a cosmetics company and competitor to Revlon. While people assumed for years that Peter's career was funded by the sale of makeup, 1972 was the first time it truly was. Revson qualified 3rd in his debut at Argentina, where engine problems knocked him out of the race. Race 2 in South Africa saw him earn his first podium with a 3rd place finish. McLaren's deal with Gulf required Revson to run IndyCar's Triple Crown of 500-mile races, even when they conflicted with Formula One. He returned to Indianapolis and qualified 2nd, but fell out early with gearbox issues. In September, Revson won the pole for the Canadian Grand Prix and finished 2nd. Despite missing 3 races, Peter finished 5th in the World Championship, with the 2nd best average finish, and had 4 podiums in 9 races.
Race car driver Peter Revson talks to parents.
Monte Carlo, where racing reputations have been made and lost. I think it's one of the most exciting race courses in the world.
And this is the excitement of Monte Carlo in miniature, a 3-level spiral hill climb in Aurora's Monte Carlo AFX race set. With cars you and your kids can drive with electric speed controllers, to go fast, to go slow. With cars you can control. Aurora's AFX Monte Carlo race set. You just can't get any closer to real racing.
Off-track, Revson transitioned to mainstream celebrity. His face appeared on boxes of slot cars. In the spring, Pageant magazine voted him America's sexiest athlete. He had an aftermarket parts company selling turbochargers. Drugstores sold Peter Revson brand sunglasses. Rev Up vitamins were marketed to men as active as he was. And ABC's Superstars competition pitted him against other athletes in games.
Peter Revson, young, glamorous, brave, from the racing circuits of the world, going against Rod Gilbert, hockey star of the New York Rangers. That's it. Peter Revson is the champion of the champions in the sport of tennis. Full congratulations to you. A real good performance in tennis.
I understand Jackie Stewart just called and wants to challenge you in golf.
I'd say the little bit of wet weather made me hesitant. I was about to call for my Goodyear rain tires.
Yeah, that's right.
Revson's coming after him. Revson's going to catch him, I think, although they have not very far to go. Peter Revson is coming for home. He wants to keep that lead and have a perfect record in the Superstars competition. It's Peter Revson winning his second consecutive event. Bob Seegert is second. And still coming in is Jean-Claude Keeley, who will be third.
Hey, you know, you used to hear people say that racing drivers weren't athletes. You've heard that line, haven't you?
Well, I've stored up a lot of energy after sitting down all these years, Jim.
The first half of the F1 season was highlighted by a second-place finish in South Africa. After 3 races, McLaren introduced their new car, the M23, which brought a boost in performance.
Here, 1971 pole sitter Peter Revson of Redondo Beach, and the green flag is out, and he's in it.
It's the third lap. Peter Revson loses control and hits the wall at the start of the main straightaway.
At the 1973 Indy 500, Revson struggled with a poor handling car throughout practice and crashed on lap 4. With the race delayed by crashes and rain until Wednesday, he flew straight to Europe for the Monaco Grand Prix and finished 5th. McLaren's contract with Gulf and IndyCar required him to miss the French Grand Prix to run the Pocono 500 instead. Revson won the pole, but engine problems knocked him out before the 200-mile mark. He returned to Europe for the British GP.
The flag's up. Jackie Stewart going through on the inside behind Ronnie Peterson. Jackie Stewart made a blinding start. It's still Peterson on the inside, just holding Stewart out as they go through Copse for the first time. Jackie Stewart, Ronnie Peterson, Carlos Reutemann, Jody Scheckter ahead of Danny Hulme, and then Francois Sebert. Jody Schechter's lost it. Jody Scheckter has been hit. A multiple shunt at the end of the first lap. Jody Scheckter with the McLaren lost it, coming out of Woodcote at 160 miles an hour. Got all across the road, and there, what a shambles. There you can see what the gap is between Ronnie Peterson, JPS number 2 there, and Pete Revson in Yardley McLaren number 8, and he's closing up a lot at Beckett's. He's definitely challenging now as they go through Chapel Curve there and down onto Hanger Street, building up the speed to 180 miles an hour. You see how Revson and the McLaren has closed right up so that he's invisible. He was slipstreaming. Now he's going to try for the inside at Stowe, and he takes the lead. Pete Revson takes the lead on the 39th of the 67 laps. And so now it's Pete Revson in the lead, Ronnie Peterson second. The sands of time are running out. Pete Revson's on his way up towards the checkered flag now, through Abbey for the last time, coming through Woodcote for the last time, sweeping towards his first Grand Prix victory, and Pete Revson wins from Ronnie Peterson, who very nearly touches Danny Hulme, and James Hunt is just out of that.
Revson, congratulations, your first ever Grand Prix win. How does it feel?
Well, it feels great. I've been waiting a long time for this.
I remember you here at Silverstone in 1964. It must seem a long, long time ago.
It sure does, and since then my ambition was to win a Grand Prix, and I'm glad it could be the British Grand Prix.
How did you feel about this race, restarting after all the shambles at the beginning?
Well, I was pretty happy about it, because I got a pretty lousy start the first time around, and the second one wasn't too good either. So I got to learn how to jump the flag.
What has happened to the McLarens all of a sudden?
Well, we've had a good car right from the beginning, and of course we have good tires on Goodyear, and we've got good cars and good engines, and we've had good cars from the beginning, but the design is only 3 months old, and it's taken 3 months to get it sorted out.
Winning a race wasn't enough to secure his job, as before the next race, Peter was told he wouldn't return to McLaren in 1974. The team reached a deal with defending champion Emerson Fittipaldi, who brought high-dollar Marlboro and Texaco sponsorships.
Ladies and gentlemen, the California 500.
And on the pole, car number 15. From Redondo Beach, California, and New York City, the McLaren Offenhauser that went 200.098 miles per hour in qualifying of Peter Revson.
Into turn two, it is Peter Revson out in front of it, probably about 100 yards at the moment as he really got off to a real quick start. John Cock in second place as they go charging down that back straightaway and into three. Peter Revson's car sounded a little sick as he came out of turn four. There was a lot of crackling and strange noises, so it may be that Revson's got some problems after leading in the early going of the race.
Once again, engine failure knocked him out before halfway. Revson entered the Canadian Grand Prix with plans for next year coming into focus. Following a third-place finish at Monza, he reached an agreement with Ferrari to drive for the Italian team in 1974. Revson earned his second win of 1973 in the Canadian GP. The main story was the controversy that surrounded it. For the first time, a safety car was deployed in a Formula One race. But the unfamiliar circumstances caused questions about whether Revson was the correct winner or merely a scoring error. Revson explained the race from his point of view in his book. The race started in the rain. The track dried, race leader Emerson Fittipaldi pitted and switched to a dry weather setup that involved hooking up the roll bars. Revson's team simply changed the dry tires and went back. Sacrificing handling for time saved in the pits, Revson's stop was about 60 seconds faster than Fittipaldi's. Then the safety car came out for a crash. By mistake, the safety car picked up the wrong car as the leader, which trapped Fittipaldi at the tail end of the lead lap and denied his rightful ability to catch up to the back of the field. Revson took the lead after the safety car pulled off and beat Fittipaldi by 32 seconds. After Canada, McLaren offered Peter a compromise. They would run a third team in 1974 to honor their contract with Yardley. For Revson, McLaren wouldn't guarantee that the team would get the same equipment as the two main cars, so the option was unappealing. Then came word that Ferrari would only pay Revson $100,000 to drive and wouldn't allow him to race anywhere else. That meant he would make much less money than he had been. He also had an offer from the American-owned Shadow team, which was a new team for 1973, but eager to have a top American driver. Revson knew this decision would determine his career. If he couldn't find a race-winning car, he would retire soon. As he wrote in his book, "If I'm not going to be a winner this year or next, I'm going to quit. Finishing fourth or third or second is not worthwhile. I've done that. I don't want to go on as a journeyman. Racing won't accept me as that for much longer. Racing only accepts you if you're improving or if you're a winner. But if you're established that you're not going to be a winner, you're finished. People pay for winners, or they'll pay for potential in this business." Revson's last race for McLaren was the U.S. Grand Prix at Watkins Glen. Clutch problems at the start dropped him to last, but he charged through the field to finish fifth. The second year in a row, Revson finished fifth in points. It marked the first time in 5 years a McLaren driver won multiple races.
How many times have you wondered what would happen if you took the 12 finest race drivers in the world and put them in the same kind of an automobile and put them on a racetrack together? Who do you think would win? Well, it's finally been done in an international race of champions. Not one race, but 4. There will be 3 elimination races here at the Riverside International Raceway in Southern California, and the 4th race to determine the most versatile champion of them all will be run at Daytona, Florida. All right, Jackie, and as the field moves around toward turn 9 and the start of our race of champions, let's set the grid for you. It's Mark Donahue on the pole. Peter Revson is outside. Donahue in a white car and Revson in the yellow car. In the second row, it's David Pearson and Denny Hulme. Bobby Unser and A.J. Ford behind them, followed by Bobby Allison, Richard Petty, Gordon Johncock, Roger McCluskey, Emerson Fittipaldi, and George Fulmer is in the number 12 position.
Mark Donahue jumps off the pole and grabs the lead. Heading into the S's. They're tightly jammed in the middle of the pack. Emerson Fittipaldi in the white Porsche goes out in front. Bobby Allison into the pink cars. In second place, Gordon Johncock in the yellow car moves up now. And George Fulmer moving up out of the back. Peter Revson is off the track in the dirt. Coming around, Donahue wins the 3rd race. Bobby Unser is 2nd. Emerson Fittipaldi takes 3rd. David Pearson is 4th. George Fulmer 5. A.J. Foyt coming along. He takes 6th. Here are the 6 men who have qualified for the championship run. George Fulmer, Bobby Unser, Mark Donahue, Peter Revson, David Pearson, A.J. Foyt. Here's Jackie Stewart to talk with them.
Peter, road racing.
That's what this is called, yeah.
Well, I think everybody's going to be happy that you're going to be down there, an American driver, road racing at Daytona. This must mean a lot to you.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to go to Daytona, and I'm happy I made it.
Very good. Mark, a great race. Very smooth, very clean, no mistakes, always in front.
That's very lucky. Starting from the pole position and being able to see everybody going sideways and backwards behind me, why, it was a great help to get ahead.
From victory lane, Donahue announced he would retire from racing after the IROC finale at Daytona. Minutes later, Roger Penske announced Revson would take Donahue's place on the team at the 1974 Indy 500. In November, Revson's plans for the next year came into focus. He would drive for Shadow in Formula One and Can-Am. It was believed the deal with Shadow was a one-year placeholder until Team Penske entered Formula One in 1975, at which point Revson would drive for them. In February, it was even speculated he could leave Shadow in September when the Penske F1 car was ready. Like other celebrities, Revson's personal life continued to be the topic of national tabloids. At an autograph session leading up to the 1973 Indy 500, Revson met 19-year-old Marjorie Wallace, a local model. On September 20th, 3 days before Peter won the Canadian GP, Wallace was chosen to represent the United States in the Miss World competition.
Miss United States of America.
Another country looking for their first ever Miss World title. Marjorie Wallace carries their hopes.
Indianapolis, where you're from, I imagine, is a fairly lively place.
Well, during the month of May, yes. All during May, the 500 Festival brings thousands and thousands of people from all over the place, so...
Are you keen on motor racing?
I enjoy it. I go and watch.
Miss World 1973 is Miss United States of America.
Peter Revson.
Even when I'm not racing, you can find me at the track. The Aurora AFX Grand Royale, for me, the closest thing to real racing. So close it even sounds like real racing. Because it's got Revomatic sound. This new sound device that's hooked up to the speed controller. The faster it goes, the more the roar. AFX, the one racing set that's broken the sound barrier.
Aurora's AFX with Revomatic sound. Parents should know it's the closest thing to real racing. Revomatic sound also available in the Revomatic 500 set.
The 1974 F1 season began in January at the Argentinian GP. Revson qualified fourth, the best start for the young team, and over 2 seconds faster than his teammate. Unfortunately, he was hit by Clay Regazzoni in the first turn and knocked out of the race. At Brazil, he qualified sixth and fell out with overheating problems. Then it was back to the U.S., where he began hosting a radio program in Los Angeles. His autobiography, Speed with Style, was completed.
The final race of the International Race of Champions will be run on the twisting road course here at the Daytona International Motor Speedway, a course that will demand everything the man and machine has to offer. Meantime, the drivers, Donahue, Revson, Pearson, Ulmer, Unser, Foyt, are waiting for the call to enter their cars and begin the final run of the International Race of Champions, the start in a moment. And they approach the start line symmetrically. Here we go! George Fulmer takes a jump in the yellow car, and he moves immediately up in front of Mark Donahue at the top. Donahue down low may fight him off, tightly bunched. In the black car, Peter Revson goes high and drops off the pace. It is Mark Donahue regaining the lead as they come out of turn 2 and head up the back straight. Still tightly packed. Now they will enter the road course. The brakes, all 6 men hit the brakes simultaneously, and they go in tight in the pack. There's some dust and dirt, but it is George Fulmer in the yellow car who has the lead.
Coming in alongside now, they're coming in side by side. He's taking the lead. There, Mark was through into the braking area. They're about to hit the brakes now. There they go under the brakes. Mark's holding the tight line in. George is keeping the right distance behind them as they go into that turn into the infield.
Running in third place, it is Peter Revson. Bobby Unser now in the 4th spot, beginning to take a draft and take a run. And Revson in the blue car, the USAC champion, Indy winner 1968, passes Revson and holds third place. Revson, however, sitting right in behind the veteran from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Peter now beginning to get a draft on the straight. Revson and Unser in a battle. Revson comes up alongside, and Peter Revson moves into third place. So Peter, who has driven race cars all over the world, moves into third place. Turn and going onto the road course, and George Fulmer has slowed down. Something must be wrong with George's car. He comes down low and drops off the pace, and Bobby Unser is now running in second place. Peter Revson goes by to take third, and George Fulmer has a sick automobile. The fight for second place should be something to see. Donahue's well out in front. Let's watch what happens between these two great drivers, Unser in the blue and Revson in the black. Donahue coming off turn number 4. Mark can almost coast home now and win it. Donahue coming down, heading for the start-finish line. The checkered flag is in the air, and Mark Donahue won the International Race of Champions.
And what a race it's going to be! Here's Peter Revson trying to get up the inside. Is he going to do it? He's done it! It's what a good ride! Really, in the end, fantastic.
They banged door handles as Peter Revson went down low, and Bobby Unser banged into him a little bit.
Congratulations, Peter. How did you pull it off? Well, we were playing a little bit out there, passing and repassing. It seemed like Bobby could pass me at the top end easier than I could pass him. And I figure I might be able to do it once, so I better make that once count.
Newspapers in the spring of 1974 closely followed the gossip surrounding Revson and Miss World, Margie Wallace. English tabloids reported as soccer legend George Best was arrested on the allegations he stole items from her London apartment. Photos of Wallace on a beach with married singer Tom Jones were scandalous, and it was reported that Wallace and Revson were now engaged, something they denied. On March 6th, organizers of Miss World stripped Wallace of her title, saying she failed the basic requirements of the title. On March 10th, she joined Revson at Ontario Motor Speedway to watch the California 500. The next week was an on-points race of champions at Brands Hatch. In heavy rain, Revson finished in 6th. 5 days later, F1 teams were in South Africa, testing for the race a week later. Reports said that Revson had posted the second fastest time behind Emerson Fittipaldi. As Revson entered the fast right-handed turn 2, the titanium ball joint on his left front suspension broke and sent his car through the Armco barrier. Fittipaldi was the car directly behind Peter when he crashed. Immediately, he stopped and tried to pull Revson from the burning crash. Graham Hill and Benny Holm also rushed to the scene and tried desperately to pull out their American friend.
Peter Revson, the 35-year-old racing driver and jet-setting member of the Revlon Cosmetics family, died today after his car crashed on a South African racing track. Revson had been practicing for next week's South African Grand Prix when his car went off the track and burst into flames. Rescuers pulled him from the wreckage, but some officials at the track near Johannesburg said he died on impact. It was not immediately known what caused the accident. Witnesses said a steering component apparently failed, and race officials said he'd been having trouble with the car's suspension. Revson, who's been racing for 14 years, had been considered one of the world's top racers. Last year, he won both the Canadian and the British Grand Prix.
Fellow drivers were heartbroken. Journalists mourned America's top road racer. Others called him the most popular driver at Indianapolis in past years. They spoke of his natural kindness to people and his mainstream appeal. Roger Penske was a pallbearer at Revson's funeral and delivered a eulogy. Mark Donahue said to the press, "One of the greatest injustices was the reputation Peter got as a playboy. He was anything but that. Nobody ever applied himself any harder to succeed in what he did." Team Penske was unable to find a driver of Revson's caliber to take his seat in the Formula One car they were developing for 1975. Donahue came out of retirement to race it. Just over 500 days after Revson's passing, Mark Donahue lost his life in a crash in Austria. In 1978, Mario Andretti won the Formula One World Championship and fulfilled the hopes that Revson had of being the first American champion since Phil Hill in 1961. Revson's memory returned to Indianapolis in 1975 when his mother paid $100 in a crowdfunding campaign to put Peter's name on Sheldon Kinzer's car. In 2021, on the 50th anniversary of Revson's pole at Indy, McLaren ran a tribute car in his honor, with Juan Pablo Montoya at the wheel. Revson's life story felt like a Hollywood movie, and there were many attempts to bring it to screens. In late 1974, the Revson estate turned down movie offers from the ABC network and George Hamilton. In 1983, Bruce Jenner hoped to produce and star as Peter in a film. In 1990, Canadian hockey great Doug Gilmour was cast to star as Revson in a movie, but the project was canceled before filming started. In a world where heroes sometimes die and movies are made to tell their story, it's appropriate that Peter Revson would be targeted by Hollywood. Some of the best stories are those of great accomplishments. Since 1970, more Americans have stood on the moon than stood on the top of a Formula One podium. When some goals seemed like a world away, Peter Revson showed how far someone could go.
I think it was Grantland Rice who said something about appreciating or thanking God for heroes. They show the common people how far they can go. And I must admit, at one point I looked up to heroes because they showed me how far I could go. And now, I don't consider myself a hero, but I still have heroes.